This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Welcome to the Marvel Age Masterclass podcast with host Ben Morse. Episode 4, 1964, Part 2, with Todd Weber.
Greetings, Marvel maniacs and Place to Be Nation pop fanatics. It is another episode of Marvel Age Masterclass. I am your master of ceremonies, Benjamin Morse, currently visiting professor at UNLV, formerly editorial director of digital media at Marvel Entertainment for a decade. A decade I spent there. Wow, good times. We are rolling right into part 2 of our analysis of Marvel in 1964. Of course, if you have not already listened to the Mothership Marvel Age podcast covering 1964, and then listen to the first episode of Marvel Age Masterclass covering 1964, and then I'm going to get right back into it with my man, Todd Weber. Mr. Weber, good morning. I already said good morning to you off the air, but I'll say it again.
Good morning. It's a beautiful morning here in sunny California, and I'm glad to have you fresh off your triumphant TED Talk at UNLV.
Dun, 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 dun. Yes, we're recording this on Saturday morning. I had a great experience at the TEDx UNLV event yesterday, Friday. I spoke about comics for about 15, well, it was supposed to be about 15 minutes. I think I went about 18. And if anyone who's listened to this podcast can understand that I'm a little long-winded. But yeah, it was a great success. Lots of great speakers covering everything from poverty to autism to October 1 survivors from the tragedy that took place here in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I am based. And just a lot of great stuff. If you want to see the event, it was recorded and it is currently streaming on unlv.unlv.edu/TEDxUNLV. So a little bit of a, yeah, that's a fairly short web address, but it feels long when you say it out loud. But yeah, man, I'm glad to be back talking to you, Todd. How have you been?
Not bad. It's been a good week. Enjoying living in the Marvel U and checking out the Webby Award-winning Marvel Universe app and all kinds of great stuff. Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, well, we've got a lot of Marvel U to cover today. Classic stuff from 1964. Some of the heavy hitters on board today. Some real big titles, some of the stuff that did big stuff in the 60s, and there were big events happening in them. So let's jump right in and discuss what was going on in 1964 in Fantastic Four. Now, to me, by 64, it's about 25 issues in, Lee and Kirby have really hit their stride on this book. It's pretty seamless. They've got the personalities of the main cast down. They're able to introduce ancillary supporting characters as well as villains pretty seamlessly. And the guest stars are also a lot of fun. And specifically, Fantastic Four 25 and 26, I believe, hinge on a huge crossover guest appearance, call it what you will, as it is the first ever, or no, the second ever, but the first real fight between the Hulk and the Thing. As the Hulk comes back into the book, as I said, Hulk finding his footing as kind of a freelance menace threat circling around the Marvel Universe, showing up in various titles, fighting the headline characters. But there's something about the Thing-Hulk rivalry that made it stand out. Hulk has fought everybody from Thor to Cap to Spider-Man to Namor to everybody, but there's something special about when Hulk and Thing hook it up. And I think Lee and Kirby nailed it right from the first time. I mean, they had a briefly battle earlier in the FF series, I think in 63, but their encounter here in 64, number one, is some of the best Jack Kirby art to date. He excels at many things, as we've covered. Great costume designer, great set designer, but a true master of action. And the back and forth between Hulk and Thing in these issues really demonstrate that. But I think more than anything, setting up the Thing as this underdog, this perennial, almost like Rocky Balboa figure, who is constantly fighting from underneath, trying to keep up with this overwhelming force of the Hulk. I think that's what's made this rivalry sing so much, and I think they nail it right here in this story. They establish the roles of the Hulk and the Thing right off the bat, and they kind of break it away from the first Hulk-Thing fight was really part of a larger Hulk versus FF fight, but this really gets personal in terms of Hulk and Thing, and I think they established right off the bat that this is going to be a fun rivalry that, of course, we will get many installments of throughout the years.
The dynamic action of these fight panels are tremendous. It's Kirby at his best. You can tell Kirby's almost rooting for Thing himself, the way it's drawn. You know, he's more Absolutely. Of your protagonist here. And I have projected Kirby onto the Thing as a person. And I don't know if that's just because of that. I believe it was a What If the Marvel bullpen were the original Fantastic Four or something like that. That old What If issue. I don't know if you ever saw that where.
Oh, of course.
Stan was Mr. Fantastic. So I think it was Saul Brodsky was. Yep. Was Jack the Thing or was he the Human Torch in that issue?
Jack was the Thing.
Yeah.
Jack had to be the Thing.
Yeah.
Saul was the Torch, and then my old friend
Flo Steinberg.
Who I actually got to work with at Marvel for a number of years, and just what a delight. One of the most incredible people. Just like she was awesome because she was this she was everybody's grandma,
right?
Like in the Marvel offices, just this sweetheart old woman. And then you would walk out of the building with her, and she would just light up a cigarette, and she was just like this. She was sweet, she was kind, she was so great, but she was also a tough lady. And man, the stories. I wanted to get her on a podcast or like anything so badly.
Was she in production or what was her official role other than
She was actually in proofreading.
Okay.
She had, of course, famously worked for Stan as kind of his Girl Friday, his secretary, his administrative assistant back in the 60s. And then been at Marvel in various capacities off and on. I know she had a big role in kind of the indie comics phase of the 80s, and just a fount of information, just wonderful. A wonderful person and really talented. But she came back to Marvel, I think in the 90s or 2000s, probably the 2000s. By the time I got there, she was a proofreader, and she was there full-time when I started, and then she gradually scaled back and was doing part-time. But knew everybody's name, was so kind to everybody, always asked me like specific questions about my wife, about Boston, because she had relatives in Boston, and just a sweetheart. And of course she passed away, like over a year ago now, but really a tremendous influence on anyone who met her, and just a credit to the business and the stories she had about Stan and Jack and all these people who she was, she and the cool thing about Flo is she was really the original. If you think of now of like Marvel being, I always argue Marvel's the more approachable company over DC. They're just so out there on social media and everywhere. That started with Flo Steinberg. She just she reached out to the fans, and she was the one answering the letters and sending out the no prizes and doing all this stuff. So, key part of Marvel.
So we talk, or you bring up the supporting cast of the FF quite a bit. So far, it's just Alicia Masters, as far as I can tell.
Because we're not at the exciting introduction of Wyatt Wingfoot quite yet. We're still waiting on that. Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I think with FF, because it was a team book, it was almost like, do we need a huge supporting cast? There's already 4 main characters. I would argue that in some ways Doctor Doom is the 5th main character, and then you have Alicia, and then you have recurring characters like eventually, you'll eventually have recurring guest stars like the Surfer, like the Black Panther, who we'll get into later, like the Inhumans. But yeah, eventually it's interesting because you look at the FF today, and
Willie Lumpkin, we forgot about him.
Willie Lumpkin, how can we forget about Willie Lumpkin? FF's got a pretty extensive supporting cast today, but that's just a matter of as they grew over time, they kind of extended the family. Yeah, they extended the family metaphor, literally, by having kids and whatnot. But I don't know. What do you think, Todd, of saying that almost like? All right, this is gonna be a bold statement,
Okay.
so we'll see if we'll back it up or not. I almost would peg the Hulk as not a supporting character, but definitely a recurring character. But I think it's less for FF and more for the Marvel universe in general.
Yeah.
He's like the ultimate supporting character.
Well,
even though he is a villain.
just like they're using him in the MCU. You know, they don't have a Hulk Marvel movie per se, but here he is having these individual arcs or this character changing development in each movie that's not his.
Right.
They swung and missed with the Hulk series, which was very derivative early on, and so here they're having a chance. So, well, let's take a step back. We have this character that looks great, that is visually iconic. Let's do some more things. Let's kind of pull Rick Jones away from him. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of what makes the Hulk different, and what can we do? Stan's saying, how can we make him compelling and make him into what would eventually be the second most popular character in Marvel. Mm-hmm. And so, we see that here with more of a unique take on him, where he's all alone, can't control when he's Banner, he can't control what the Hulk does, and they're two separate personalities, independent of one another. Another thing that makes the Thing Hulk fights always a little bit special is because that's what these characters are. They are bulky bruisers with super strength and some invulnerability, but because Thing is part of a team, he is considered not as strong as the Hulk, and we find out, they test their limits, and he's always going to be a little bit less strong, at least the way the Hulk is presented here, where he doesn't have the intelligence holding him back. Sometimes you see a hybrid version of the Hulk where he's not as strong, but he's more in control, and that character evolved or developed with Peter David and other writers who, there's like a Hulk spectrum of, he's even more out of control and powerful and strong, but less intelligent. And so, at this iteration anyway, he's just a little bit more strong than the Thing is. And so he's if it's just a matter of brute strength. So Thing sometimes has to rely on his teammates, sometimes has to rely on his wits, or his underdog, just will to keep going, keep fighting against the Hulk. And visually, it's so great. You have this orange guy versus this green guy. DC characters were almost always primary colors. These guys are a little bit more secondary things going on.
Yeah.
And we don't think about the colors as much, but it was definitely something that stood out.
A number of good points there, Todd. I think number one, I'm blown away by you're so right about the comparison between the early Marvel universe and kind of how the Marvel Cinematic Universe has evolved as it regards the Hulk. Didn't really work out initially with either, as far as being a solo star. Became really great when he was placed in the context of other characters, be it in Avengers, Thor Ragnarok, etc. And now, probably maybe among the most beloved members of the cinematic universe. People are chomping at the bit for him to get his own shot at a solo series again, but really interesting stuff there. Yeah, I think you nailed it with the Hulk Thing dynamic. I think the best Hulk Thing fights to me, of course, this is actually, honestly, this is my favorite Hulk Thing fight. There's been some great ones over the years, but I don't think anyone, and that's a lot on Kirby, I don't think anyone has lived up to what I consider the original one, because again, I don't consider their initial skirmish to be a real part of the pantheon, but I do think what you said about the Thing having to use his wits, because Hulk, even here, when Hulk's not completely the dumb Hulk we would see more of in the 70s, he's still this overwhelming force of nature, and what trips him up in many ways is his arrogance. I think early Hulk was a very arrogant character by design. He's the id, he's the evil dark side of Bruce Banner, and he just he overestimates his own worth and underestimates everyone else. Ben Grimm, by contrast, is not the smartest guy in the Fantastic Four, obviously overshadowed by Reed, but not an idiot, and street smart above all else. And I think that's where the Kirby comparisons come in. They were both kind of street smart kids who grew up in New York and really learn to care for themselves and protect themselves at an early age. And by the time we get to Ben Grimm as an adult, as the Thing, it is really the ultimate battle of wits versus brawn. I wouldn't say brain versus brawn, because the Thing is certainly he's not a genius, but it's a matter of him using his street smarts, his wits, and like you said, just his kind of undying spirit. The fact that he will continue fighting even when the odds seem so much against him. That's why, again, I compared him to Rocky, even though he predated Rocky by many years. But I think that's what makes Hulk versus Thing great, is that you can see some other. This had certainly been done before, both by DC and Marvel, where you pit strong characters against one another. But I think both of us have kind of touched on what made Hulk versus Thing stand out from the typical put these two bruisers in a story together and let them punch it out. I think we've kind of said why this is a special rivalry, and I don't think there's any rivalry. I'm going to say certainly not in the Marvel universe. It's as exciting and revered as Hulk versus Thing, and maybe in all of comics. It may be the top rivalry, certainly between heroes, not counting heroes versus villains. But when you think of heroes duking it out, I always think of Hulk versus Thing.
Pretty astute. I enjoy these fights, and it carries over into 26, but they bring the Avengers in. One quick thing about 25, they again name him Bob Banner. This has happened twice in the pages of the Fantastic Four.
Interesting.
Also, the Spider-Man was Peter Palmer. Yeah, I think that was an Amazing Spider-Man 1, but during his FF crossover. Is there something about the editorial process of the FF that allows this to happen?
It's almost the thing that's funny. It's like, wow, I wish the guy who wrote and edited Hulk could get on the same page as the guy who wrote and edited Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they're the same guy.
They're exactly the same.
Let's just chalk it up to the fact that Stan was writing and editing like a dozen books, so he just got confused once in a while. But I want to talk about what you just mentioned, and that's bringing in the Avengers to meet with the FF. This is the first meeting between the Avengers and the FF in number 26. Great, I say underrated cover. I love the cover to Fantastic Four number 26, with just cramming all the characters and doing all the action there. What's interesting to me is that, so when we started out with the FF, they were kind of the ultimate dysfunctional team, in the sense they were always bickering, they're always arguing, everyone has their little rivalries and their petty stuff going on. But by issue 26 of Fantastic Four, they're a pretty well-oiled machine. And you bring in the Avengers, who are still only, less than a year old at this point, and kind of resemble the early FF in the sense that Iron Man, Thor, Giant Man, Wasp, and Cap don't necessarily, they're not all on the same page. They are individuals struggling to work together. And what's interesting to me is when you put them up against the FF in this time period, it gives you a chance to really appreciate how the FF have grown and how they are not only this family, but this cohesive fighting unit, versus the Avengers, who are still very much a group of individuals struggling to come together as a team. It's like, as a sports, if you use a sports analogy, it's the FF is a team that has struggled, and you've kind of seen them come up from the bottom, and now they are almost a dynasty, versus the Avengers, who are still very much in their formative years and kind of trying to put things together. So I like that bringing the Avengers almost makes you appreciate the FF more and how far they've come since their early formative issues.
Yeah, this was a nice contrast between them. In my opinion, I don't think the Avengers really clicked until they rebooted the whole thing, and then when everybody came back after the reboot, then they seemed to have just a better team, well-defined roles and everything. At this point, they're still in their growing stages. You still see the individual personalities of Iron Man. Thor is kind of a peacemaker here, which is great. Thor's the one that says, let's just remember why we're here. We're going after the Hulk. Panel layout for this issue is really nice. I forget how many 9-panel grids, which is my favorite way to read comics. I don't know if we've had this talk, but one of my favorite books of all time was Justice League International, and then of course not as well known was the Legion of Superheroes done by Keith Giffen, and it was all 9-panel grids, and I love those. And the last couple pages go to that. But enough about that. The cover itself, I had never seen this cover before, and it's kind of an underrated. It wasn't iconic or anything, but it's really strong to have all the characters on there in the design. I had never seen this cover. I don't know if it just wasn't in the old Marvel history books. I had the Marvel fun books and things like that would show you the big covers like Avengers 4 and Fantastic Four #1. But I've never seen this cover even homaged, which is pretty cool.
I think the thing that I think the reason #6 gets overlooked as a cover is because it is part 2 of a 2-part story, and the cover to 25 is pretty iconic as well. So I think you tend to people don't use both of them. They'll show the cover to 25 a lot when talking about this story. I've got a lot of time for the Keith Giffen Legion of Superheroes, by the way, Todd. So we are definitely on the same page yet again, and Justice League International. But I love the Levitz Giffen Legion is one of my favorite runs of all time. And when Giffen took over, it was fantastic. Giffen also, man, what a character.
Yeah, he's I recommend Ambush Bug if anybody has not read Ambush Bug. That's 100% Keith Giffen, even though it's got other creators, Robert Lord Fleming, and I think DeMatteis. How do we say that name?
J.M. DeMatteis.
Yeah,
J.M. DeMatteis. Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. Giffen's Marvel stuff, not to be overlooked as well. The 2000s Marvel stuff. I mean, we wouldn't. I always say we would not have Marvel Cosmic, Guardians of the Galaxy, Nova, etc. If Keith Giffen hadn't done the original Annihilation. He was the guy who basically brought Marvel Cosmic into the 21st century, and he doesn't get credited enough for that. If you look at it, if you want to really trace it back, the Guardians of the Galaxy who are in the movie, that's Keith Giffen's Annihilation Star-Lord miniseries. That's where they come from.
Because to me, the Abnett Lanning stuff is right there, and you see the characters right off the page. But if they started, and I haven't read Annihilation, I'll have to check that out. So that's really what that spun out of.
You need to check out Annihilation. It's one of my favorite all-time Marvel events, partially because I am a Nova mark, and Nova gets to be the big star there. But honestly, read Annihilation. Even go further back to read. Giffen was the one who made Drax into the Drax he is today in the Drax the Destroyer miniseries that he did with Mitch Breitweiser on art, and then moves into doing, like I said, the Annihilation Prelude, all the great miniseries that lead in. He did the Star-Lord miniseries that had Star-Lord, Groot, and Rocket together. And then later, Abnett and Lanning would bring Gamora and Drax into the mix. Okay. But yeah, man, as long as we're recommending stuff, we should talk about Annihilation sometime because it's really, really good. But yeah, Keith Giffen, hugely underrated in terms of contributions to both the DC and Marvel universes. Anyways, getting back to Fantastic Four in 1964. The other thing we've got going on in 64 is, particularly in the annual, more fleshing out of Doctor Doom's character, more moving him towards the Doctor Doom that we would all come to know and love later on. What did you think of kind of the progression of Doom, and what elements were added to him here that you thought kind of advanced him and really started pushing him up as an upper echelon, not only Fantastic Four villain, but kind of an all-time comics villain?
Yeah, so Fantastic Four Annual 2 was 2 separate stories. You had the Doom origin tale with all the gypsy stuff, all of it. And then him going away to go to college and meeting Reed. And so they really expand on the Doom Reed backstory and rivalry. And it's I suppose it's a retcon because the first time Reed and Doom meet in 5, we don't have any allusion to all of this stuff, which just kind of like, that's Doom. But here they were friends and rivals. I don't know, close friends or anything, but roommates. And, you get to see a lot of that connection. This was quite quite the epic tale, though, with all the mother issues and the sorcery and the gypsy aspect and Doom wandering the earth, all kinds of crazy stuff that adds to the desperation and obsession of Doom as a villain. And I like that we still never see his face, and we get the origin of the armor, origin of the mask, almost like a early. I see a lot of the later Kirby stuff in New Gods in this issue 5. This kind of big epic tale of one character. I see a little bit of Kirby's a through line to the Dark Side story, and I don't know if I just have recency bias because I've been reading a lot of New Gods lately, but it just feels bigger. And it should. It's an annual. It just feels like he was given the space to really tell this tale. And we haven't had an in-depth origin story for a villain like this before. Not this in-depth. I guess we had a little bit of Namor in the first annual, but he was a pre-existing character. Here, Stan gets a chance to tell it whole cloth from the very beginning and go through and give a lot more background. And Doom is just as smart as Reed, it seems like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be a broken record and repeat stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to be a broken record and repeat stuff I already said in my epic comments on Doctor Doom from when he was introduced. But yeah, this is the good stuff. This is where Doom really gets put ahead as just the villain of Fantastic Four, and by virtue of Fantastic Four being kind of the hub of the Marvel Universe at this point, he is the villain of the Marvel Universe. The stuff, the background stuff, this is almost like a template for later when we get the origin of Magneto, and he has kind of a sympathetic side. This is that attempt to give Doom a sympathetic side. Look at what a tough life he's had. Look at all the things he had to overcome. He loves his mother, and that overrides so much of what's going on with him. But at the end of the day, it is all about Doom and Reed and connecting them, and the fact that this is the one guy who may be smarter than Doom, but on the same side of the coin, this is the one guy who may be smarter than Reed. They're the two who can get together. But for Doom, Reed will forever be the guy who ruined his life, fairly or unfairly. We, of course, see it from the objective perspective, so we know that Reed was trying to help Doom and really trying to save him from making the mistakes that he would. But from Doom's perspective, Reed prevented him from saving his mother, and because Reed interfered, in his mind, that's what scarred his face, that's what ruined his life. And so Doom, who is very much an obsessive character, he has to be obsessed with something, some sort of task, some sort of goal. And originally, his obsession is saving his mother, which carries over and will be a motivation in the future. But you see in this story the obsession move from saving his mother to gaining vengeance on Reed Richards. And it moves Doom from being a fully tragic, almost heroic character who's arrogant but acting out of a noble purpose of trying to save a loved one, to this full-on villainous character who is only out for revenge and trying to get even and trying to take down the heroic counterpart we know who has tried to save him, but ultimately, pun intended, doomed him to the existence that he now endures.
Well, you also see he is not universally reviled. In Latveria, they love him, or at least they're still scared of him, but they say, well, this place is better than it's ever been under Doom's rule. This tale, this first half anyway, holds up very well to this day. It's still very readable. You don't roll your eyes at too much of it. I think the timeline stuff with Reed, and it's Marvel timeline, we talked about in Annual 1, they alluded to Reed's hair turning white because he saved people in World War II, but they don't ever expand on that, I don't believe. Do you remember us talking about that, or that?
Yeah, absolutely.
We never get a tale, but is this before World War II in Europe? What's the deal with the Reed and Vic in college.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think. Go ahead.
Well, and Ben Grimm's in here too. So I forget we had him. My favorite part is also where Reed calls him Happy Boy. I wonder how Happy Boy is making out. So,
I think, as always, the answer as ever with Marvel time is don't think too much about it. If you do, you will drive yourself nuts. Obviously, Stan and Jack had a short-term plan when they said that Reed and Ben were in World War II together. Again, these guys were writing month to month. They were not thinking these are characters that are going to endure for decades and accumulate this long legacy. The same way when they were writing Sergeant Fury in World War II. They weren't thinking, oh, well, we're going to have to worry about these characters aging or anything like that. Those were problems for later writers to deal with. And as far as where Reed, Doom, Ben Grimm, the college years fit into the whole idea of World War II and all this other stuff, my answer forever when I was at Marvel was don't think about it. It's just going to frustrate you. Yeah. Just enjoy the stories.
Is that what Brevoort told you?
I think, interestingly, I think Brevoort would be more of the mind to try to come up with an explanation. That's just kind of his persona, is that he was smart enough and knowledgeable about this stuff that he could come up with an answer, or no, this is why it still makes sense. With me, I always just took the tack of don't think about it. It's too hard to reconcile.
Yeah, we also get them filling up pages of the annual with about 10 pages of pinups, villain pinups, and then the Fantastic Four each get their own little bio pinup or action shot. So this is Kirby having a lot of fun.
Yeah. And it's great extra added value.
Yeah. And we haven't talked, it's like a Who's Who page, or Marvel U pages before we had those back in the day. That was one of my favorite things, was I would get the A to Z Marvel Universe series covers by Ed Hannigan, I think, the first series.
Yes.
And then the deluxe series had Mern covers for some of them. Those were awesome. I would read those cover to cover and listen to all these explanations of the powers and where Giant Man's extra mass came from and where. Yeah. I think it was a lot of Peter Sanderson, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was a lot of Peter Sanderson, who I want to get on this podcast at some point. That is a goal of mine. But the Ed Hannigan covers, it's funny. Those covers, if you look, they were all
intersecting. Yeah, they made a big
so
giant
they
poster.
made up a big giant poster, which we had 2 of at Marvel. And the cool thing was at the bottom it said Hannigan, and then it said the years that it took him to do it. So it wasn't just like Hannigan 82; it was like a Hannigan 82 through 87, because this was a long, drawn out thing. A couple things about that poster. Number one, I could name just about every character on it, but there was one character who I did not know who it was. Neither did anyone. Well, no, other people knew who it was, but myself and Ryan Panagos, who was my boss and my co-host on This Week in Marvel, Agent M, we came up with a backstory for this character who, I'll try to describe it as best I can, basically has a golden orb as a head, and then this weird, like, green, cloaky type costume. And we just decided that was Golden Age Mysterio. Oh. It was Mysterio from the 30s and 40s. And we came up with a whole backstory for him.
Silent film Mysterio.
Anyone who asked us, we knew. Yeah, we said he used literal smoke and mirrors, just like old hackneyed illusions. And I actually had Todd Knock, who's a great artist and a buddy of mine.
Very good artist.
Draw for me. I had a sketchbook that I need to get back to if I ever go to conventions again, which is Golden Age. It started with him drawing Golden Age Mysterio. So he drew like a full-on like Golden Age version of Mysterio for me. And then the only other sketch I have in that sketchbook is Riley Brown drawing Golden Age Deadpool. So my aim was to get a bunch of different artists to just do Golden Age versions of Marvel characters.
That's cool.
Who weren't around in the Golden Age. And unfortunately, I stopped at 2. which kind of sucks. I need to get back out there and try it again. The other thing about that poster I remember is that another great artist and good friend of mine, Phil Jimenez, one of his dreams is to redraw that Ed Hannigan poster and bring it all, like give all the characters their modern current day looks. But he said if someone would pick up the cost of him not being able to do any other work for a good
subsidizing
3-4 years, he said he would love to recreate the Ed Hannigan Marvel Handbook covers that you loved so much and do them. I think that would be an awesome poster. Phil Jimenez art on all the characters in the Marvel universe would be very cool.
Well, Todd Knock's currently killing it on Spidey School's Out, which is an Amazon a Comixology exclusive series. That one's really good, and he did great work on Young Justice.
Absolutely. Young Justice, one of my all-time favorite series.
He's a good follow on Twitter. He's always doing napkin sketches and things like that, and he's a lot of fun and interacts with almost everybody if you talk to him. So, yeah, I like Todd Knock a lot.
One of my favorite people, and maybe my favorite.
Plus, he's a Todd.
Yeah, he's a Todd, so there you go. Me and my wife, like one of the highlights for us of New York Comic Con every year was getting dinner with Todd and his wife Dawn, who are two of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Todd has done so many cool things for me over the years. I have, when I got married, he did for my groomsmen, he drew them each as comic book superheroes, and they got to keep the art on that. And then for one of my anniversaries, he took a picture of Megan and I from Newport, Rhode Island, and rendered it, but then put a bunch of superheroes in the background. So like Nova, Miss Martian, Captain America, and Flash are basically our wedding party. So a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Dude.
I got Target gift cards for my wedding. That was kind of the
but that's
you get
good
stuff.
Don't underplay that. Target's a great place. There's a lot of valuable stuff there. So we've covered a lot of Fantastic Four here. I want to make sure we get to everything 1964 here. So I want to move on, Todd, to Spider-Man, who you guys read some great issues of. Not only his first annual, but all important, the 64 was the introduction of the Green Goblin, correct?
64 had the very first almost generic Green Goblin tale where it could have been a lot of different bad guys, but it was more about here's the visual of Green Goblin. He's just this generic mob boss, or at least with and not fully evolved, although the look was great. I loved Ditko drawing the Green Goblin, except for we talked about the flying broomstick, which was kind of silly. But the cover's great. The story itself is but there was something there in the visual for the character, and there was no Osborns at this point. So it was very nice that you had this mystery of a long-term villain who we don't see who he really is, whereas a lot of these other characters we had, bad guys anyway, we had their whole backstory, we had their origins already. And Green Goblin was the first mystery villain. You know, he was setting up for later appearances. So I loved that aspect, but the first issue featuring him was just all right for me, dog.
Yeah. The thing that stands out for me about Green Goblin is kind of what you just said, is that I would never peg him, particularly with how deep Spidey's bench is when it comes to villains, I would never peg Green Goblin as being the villain who would become his arch nemesis. He had so many great rogues. And, you know, some people would argue maybe Green Goblin's not his arch nemesis. I think that's insane. I think clearly Green Goblin is, you know, Doc Ock is a close number 2, but Green Goblin is Spider-Man's number 1 villain. And when he's introduced here, like you said, not the strongest intro. And the things they were banking on were, as you said, great visual from Steve Ditko. Just such a unique looking villain. So different. They even say, they call it out on the cover when they say, like, look at how, you know, oh, he looks so friendly and cute, and he's really incredibly dangerous. And yeah, I mean, they basically gave this guy, he looks like a clown. He looks like a joke. He does not look like a villain to be taken seriously, but there's something about that creepy Ditko design that stands out. And I think the other thing that Stan was banking on, and we'll get a lot more into this in the next few years, was, again, to your point, the mystery aspect. we haven't seen behind this guy's mask and we don't know who he is. And of course, they would play that up for all that it was worth. So I think from the beginning, Steve and Stan had plans for this guy, almost because of the manner of what they were planning to do with him, that he was going to be a long-term mystery villain, and they couldn't really show his motivation right off the bat. They couldn't show his face. I think that contributes to kind of a weak introduction, because there wasn't a lot. They couldn't do what they'd done with Doom, with Magneto, with the other Spidey villains, where they really showed their motivation. This guy, his calling card for at least his first few years of existence was going to be his mysteriousness. So they couldn't really do a great story. And eventually down the line, when they decided who he was, and of course, I'm sure you know, Todd, or if you don't, the reason Steve Ditko eventually leaves Amazing Spider-Man is over the reveal of the Green Goblin's identity. There was conflict between him and Stan. Stan had a very clear idea of who he wanted the Goblin to be, and Ditko was of the mind that the Goblin should be some random guy that we'd never met before, that Peter should take the mask off and we shouldn't know who he was. And Stan, of course, was, kind of in the more classic fiction reveals saying, there's got to be a payoff.
Right.
We've threaded this guy out for so long. We need to make him somebody who matters to Peter. And Ditko was, being Ditko, who was very opinionated on story and philosophy and everything. He loved the idea of, no, this is just some guy. He doesn't mean anything to Peter. He's just a villain. So we'll get into more of that as we go on. But, from the beginning, it was interesting that Green Goblin would eventually be the straw that breaks the camel's back as far as causing a rift between Lee and Ditko that exists to this day. But yeah, I would say right off the bat, not the most dynamic character. Something there, like you said, in the visual and in the mystery, but the stuff that would make him such a great foil for Spider-Man, that was all to come, and that would all be done later. And I guess I'm just glad they didn't give up on him, because similar to other characters we've talked about, Hulk, X-Men, etc., just not giving up on this character would eventually yield something pretty cool.
Yeah, when I was coming up as a comics reader in the early mid-'80s, Goblin had been gone forever. He'd been gone, almost 10 years at that point. And so I read about him in Marvel Universe. I read about him in the Marvel Tales reprints, but Hobgoblin was the new up-and-coming thing. So,
yes,
I had a lot of ties back to that, and so checking it out. You don't really get how malevolent he is just here. He's kind of like we talked about him. It's more a design than a character at this point, and that's fine. They're able to play with it a lot over the next. I mean, he comes back almost every 6 months for 2 more years. Yep. Until, like you said, which we'll talk about in 66, where the shit hits the fan with Green Goblin. So the character reveal, I mean, it's important historically. That's why it's on this list. But the Dr. Octopus issues were a little bit more fun, comparatively. And you get a lot of stuff happening this year for Spidey. You had Mysterio, you had Kraven, and the Sinister Six, as we see in the annual.
Let's dive right into that. Let's talk about the Sinister Six. One of my favorite single issues, maybe of all time. This was just in the same way the Fantastic Four annuals were really a showcase of Stan, but to a greater extent Kirby getting ready to really strut his stuff, especially that first annual that's done as something really special. Because this was a day when annuals were not just something you put out to put out an oversized extra issue or to be part of a crossover or any of the things that annuals would eventually become. In early Marvel, the annuals really mattered. They meant something. They were going to get something special with them. And the introduction of the Sinister Six, the original Sinister Six, is that something special. The idea that a solo hero like Spider-Man would have to take on such overwhelming odds, a team of his greatest villains, all established already, all threats on their own, all guys who he had trouble beating when it was just one-on-one. The idea of how is he going to beat these guys 1-on-6 is tremendous. And also, again, on a smaller level, shows you the grand ideas that Stan and his collaborators had for this shared universe. What would eventually become, the most successful shared universe of all time. Because again, as we flash forward many times in this podcast, talking about what would eventually become the Marvel Cinematic Universe is built on the back of this shared universe. This idea of we introduce all these characters individually, and then what a special occasion it is to see them all together. That's what they were doing here with the Sinister Six. You could actually argue this was in many ways the very first kind of... the Avengers would be the first bring all these characters together moment. But I almost felt like the Sinister Six introduction has more weight than the Avengers. However controversial that statement might be, I think seeing these... because Spider-Man was such a hit, and all his villains were such a hit, that I think seeing Doc Ock and Electro and Vulture and Sandman and Kraven and Mysterio all together, because they were all considered such A-level threats, was a bigger deal than seeing, Giant Man and Iron Man in the same book. I think these were big stars, and I think Sinister Six is a template for everything to come. We talked a lot about on this show about kind of Marvel milestones and the way the FF was the first, super team with flaws. The way Spider-Man was a template for so many heroes to come. That Doom was a formative villain. I think not only, besides being the first really cool, big supervillain team in comics, Sinister Six is also hugely important because of the idea of bringing these characters together and putting them in the same place and showing that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts, and just doing some really big, important stuff. It felt like, to this point, one of the most epic stories in the history of the Marvel Universe, which is saying something because you had all these big FF and Avengers stories, but Spider-Man, on the level he was on, where he was kind of, this solo hero, how much could he really take on? The idea of his villains banding together to form this super team, I think, was huge and can't be understated.
Yeah, well, you notice, a couple things. Everybody's green except for Kraven, which is kind of cool. So you always have that visual contrast, and they're all older compared to Peter. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that. It's like he's taking on, this kids are reading.
Evil faculty.
That's my line too. I like. Peter's a teenager. These guys are all older, masters in their field, so they're teacher figures to him almost. So as a kid, that's your wish fulfillment. You're fighting your teachers, and now they have this plan, but the chapters are broken down to one villain at a time for the most part. Right. So we're getting the morality play that, well, if the villains had worked together a little bit more, combining their powers, having a better plan, but Spider-Man's still strong enough that he's able to defeat them one at a time. But still epic.
It's the old Bruce Lee movie where everyone attacks him one at a time. So
God. Imagine being a kid in 1964 in the summer. I don't know if annuals came out in the summer, but this was your book for the summer. You just carried it around with you everywhere you go. You took it on trips. You took it on your vacations. So cool. And Russell talked about this a lot. The way these individual chapters are broken down, where he has the hero's moment. It's almost like a cutscene in a video game where you take on the villain and he overcomes. And those are pinups. They're posters. Imagine just the power of how that page would look in full size. I mean, those would be priceless. They're pop art masterpieces.
Ditko really gets to shine in this, and it's like you said, it's cool. It's basically he gets to draw the coolest version of Spider-Man beating insert villain X, whether it's Electro or Vulture or Mysterio. So cool. And you made a great point about the kind of consistent color sequence of these guys do have a visual to share, of course, except for Kraven, who looks just bizarre. Kraven has one of the most bizarre. I love that Kraven has one of the most bizarre costumes of all time, and yet throughout the history of Marvel, he's never really changed it. It's always been the same thing. It's just it's a classic weird costume. But yeah, man, Ditko getting to draw the knockout punches on these various characters is just something to behold. And again, this is a very special issue. I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying how special this issue is and how influential it would be in the future.
Yeah, it kind of felt it followed that FF1 template a little bit, where you had even in the cover dress where you had the individually colored logo letters, which I love, but they gave that up starting in 65. You don't see that anymore. But I look at that, it looks kind of dated, but that's to me part of the point. You also get the pinups. You have this one epic tale, but it's Spider-Man distilled as a character. He's got to overcome the odds, take care of Aunt May, take care of his older girlfriend, college-age girlfriend, even though he's in high school. J. Jonah gets his own moment. You also get Steve Ditko getting to draw characters like the X-Men, the Avengers. Everybody else who's in the Marvel U at this point is also drawn, but they're kind of afterthoughts. We forget about that being part of the story as much as they're in there, and it's very shameless, which is beautiful. I mean, it's tongue in cheek the way Stan does it. Like, here's a plot, here's another plug, but they're ancillary to the story for the most part.
It's really a masterpiece. Every bit of it, from the concept, the villains, to the art, to, like you said, the plugs, to the use of the supporting cast, to the idea that if you are a comics fan who has never picked up Spider-Man before, and you're picking up this annual because it looks, it jumps out at you, it's a bigger issue, it's got the funky colors in the logo, all that stuff, you are really getting, I think you were very astute in pointing out, Todd, this is Spider-Man distilled down to his essence. And this is what you're going to get from Spider-Man. And it's really the best showcase Spider-Man story they could possibly put out to sell people on wanting to read more about this character and his world that they give you a great glimpse into here.
You get his rogues gallery at the back like you did with the FF, but you also get an explanation of his powers, a very, very short origin. So, I mean, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have resource books to find out more about this character. It was all person to person talking. Hey, kid, have you heard about this Spider-Man? Here, I'll loan you. You're trading books, and this had it all, though. If you wanted to start reading the character, this was your go-to. And it was only 25 cents. And again, the economics confuse me, but boy, that sure seems like an amazing.
We don't talk about the economics on this show.
Just like the
same
time.
Way we don't. I was going to say it's the same way we don't talk about the timeline. We stay away from the economics. I will take the opportunity to plug my Twitter feed, Ben J. Morse, and say that the other day, Fabian Nicieza, my favorite comic book writer of all time, and I were having an interaction where I was making fun of the character Extreme, as I tend to do. Myself and Arun Singh, another former Marvel staffer, we like to take shots at Adam X, our favorite bad character from the 90s that Fabian created. Fabian said something about the joke's going to be on you guys when 50 years from now Marvel runs out of movie characters and they make an Extreme movie and it does over $2 billion at the box office. And I quickly jumped on Fabian, and said, if a movie in 50 years, if a Marvel movie in 50 years only makes $2 billion with inflation factored in, the joke will be on them. And he said, I was wondering if anyone would catch my slip up there with the inflation. So, while we do not talk inflation or economics here on Marvel Age Masterclass, I do talk about it on Twitter. So there's a chance for you guys to get in. Now, any final thoughts on Spidey before we move on to a couple other topics, Todd?
I don't think so. We did get, just in these issues, we got an introduction of Anna Watkins, who alludes to her niece. Like, you're going to enjoy meeting my niece down the road, but that's about all we get from her. We still don't have Gwen. We still have Betty, and Liz is kind of the only love interest, and Liz is even taking a backseat. We get a little bit less of Peter in school at this point compared to the first
you guys
year.
You guys brilliantly covered, I believe it was Amazing Spider-Man 18, which is kind of the issue that's kind of the out-of-costume issue that was really revolutionary at the time. And I'm going to, rather than get into it too in-depth here, I'm going to recommend, again, that you guys go back and listen to the flagship Marvel Age podcast on 1964, because these guys really unpacked why this is such a great and outside-the-box issue. So I want to jump back to Avengers for a sec, where we get the introduction of a new villain, and that's why it's on this list, is because, as the aforementioned Tom Brevoort would often say, the Avengers have two villains, and one of them would not be introduced for a little while, and the other one is Kang, who we meet in 1964. Kang, I love the Kirby design because it's so weird. Like, the initial Kang look is so bizarre. Just the way his mask works, he's in that floating chair, just kind of Kirby's idea of this is what the future is going to look like is so fun, because it's so bizarre and it's so counterintuitive, and it's not this, it's not Jetsons flying cars and stuff like that. It's the idea that the future will almost come full circle and come back to this idea of Kang is this regal looking character. He is, again, the conqueror. The idea that Lee and Kirby set up is that Kang is this villain, this character who has conquered the future because the future is so complacent and no one remembers how to fight anymore. And in the future, to the past to seek new challenges, specifically the Avengers, who are the greatest heroes of all time. And again, right from the get-go, really cool concept, really cool visual, a lot for it's almost, this seems like another gift to future writers and artists. I feel like Kang is a gift to the guys who would come later, because I think at this point, again, I don't feel like Avengers was mildly, it's like Kirby and Lee had to keep doing stuff on Avengers to keep themselves interested, whether that's bringing back Captain America, whether that's what we'll see next year with what they do to the team. But I think they were not as plugged into Avengers as they were Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Journey into Mystery, respectively. And as a result, the Avengers did not get a lot of great villains. You had the Masters of Evil as a recurring threat. You have some other like minor characters here and there, but basically more or less they borrow other people's villains. They use individual villains like Loki,
aliens, and space phantoms, and
a lot of aliens, a lot of just generic stuff. Because I think it was just Lee and Kirby were not bringing their A game to Avengers. I feel like, and you can give your own thoughts and disagree with me as you want here. Kang, initially introduced, okay character, really cool concept. Basically, Lee and Kirby saying like, we're not gonna spend our A material here, but hey, guys who are gonna come years, because I think at this point, I just said before, when they were doing early FF stuff, they were going month to month. I think at this point they are thinking a little bit more about the legacy of what they're doing, and I think Kang was a gift to future creative teams of, you guys can really unpack this guy and make him special and do some fun stories with him. We're just going to kind of drop him off in a so-so story and not really bring our all to it.
Yeah, if I can talk about the distinguished competition a little bit, Avengers is the most like Justice League to me.
Absolutely.
And with Justice League, you had a lot of people buying it just so that they wouldn't necessarily buy. If you're going to buy one comic as a parent, like, well, here you go, Timmy, here's all of your favorite heroes in one book. So, maybe that was the one mom would buy because she thought, oh, it's got added value. It's got all these characters in it. Well, is that going on here at Marvel? But Lee and Kirby recognizes it as such and don't really commit to it. It's just saying, well, here's these guys that we know we can sell, but there's no passion necessarily behind it, with the exception of some of the Cap stuff. It still gives a direction to the book, and the 5 heroes and the Avengers work better now than they do with the first 2 or 3 issues before Hulk leaves. But still, it feels kind of phoned in a bit. I don't want to ever accuse Comic Legends of phoning it in, but just doesn't seem like the time is into it. It's almost a rush job. Kang is a character that's got a lot of mystery to him, and so down the road, writers will unpack those mysteries and develop the character a little bit more. I do like what they did with this retcon of a Fantastic Four villain, the Pharaoh, Ramatut, and then
that was cool. That was probably the coolest thing. It was
smart,
and again showing that they're like, all right, there's something to this character. We might not be digging so much into what's going to come, but here's a lot of stuff to play with. I really think at this point, I wonder, and I don't know how it aligns time wise, but I feel like at this point we probably have Kirby and Lee starting to realize they can't do all these books forever. They're going to need to consolidate at some point. And I think they're probably seeing Avengers the same way you just described it as kind of low-hanging fruit for someone else can write and draw this book because it's going to be a hit no matter what. So let's set them up as far as giving them Captain America to play with, as far as giving them villains like Kang to play with. Like, how can we set the table for our successors, because we might not be long for this book.
Yeah, and I've never been a Kang guy, or at least I wasn't until Avengers Forever.
I was going to ask if you had read Avengers Forever.
Oh God, it's so good.
That's when most people become Kang guys.
Yeah, it's the best Kang story, and it's one of the best Avengers stories ever told. Kurt Busiek and Carlos Pacheco. Is it Pacheco?
It's Pacheco. Yeah, it's Busiek and Pacheco on that. And then Busiek would try to do kind of a sequel in his Avengers run later with Kang Dynasty, which was kind of a cool story. The only problem was it went on so long. I think it was it ran for literally 2 years or more in Avengers during a time when compression was becoming the popular form of storytelling. So it just didn't really click. But Busiek, perhaps more than anyone else, maybe Roger Stern would be the other guy, just gets Kang. And like I said, he was set up for other writers to use, and those guys really excelled at it.
And just imagine being a middle-aged man and coming up with this design. That's wild. Kirby had some great design things going on, and I like the flash forward into the future. Just the like we've talked about with the Moon stuff he did in FF. Here you have just this completely lived in, viable other world that you no doubt you when you read it, you don't doubt that that's where they're at. It's really well done. You are immersed in this comic. So yeah, it's notable because you get Kang, and it's about one of the very few, or one of the very last instances of the original Avengers team plus Cap, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of their last adventures together, and I feel like we've been all through 1964 and even a little in 63 kind of teasing hey, something big happens in Avengers, and obviously it's kind of silly that we're teasing it given that it happened decades ago. But there is a big event coming up to the Avengers. Whoever's on with me for 65, I don't like to reveal my guests ahead of time. We will talk a lot about Avengers on the 1965 episode because they actually do something really interesting, which I don't feel like they're really doing right now. Cap was a big shot across the bow, but other than that, Avengers has been certainly, of the three team books, FF, X-Men, and Avengers is the least interesting one to me in these early stages.
Yeah, it seems like it's the easiest one to do.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
And not necessarily, I'm putting all this energy into creating unique threats that can interact with the characters on their own terms, like in Spider-Man, like in Thor, Journey into Mystery. You have very Thor-specific stuff going on. Avengers, you have to paint a little broader. That's pretty much it for 64, with the exception of Doctor Strange. Am I right?
Yes. We would be remiss if we did not check in on Doctor Strange, who really wowed us in 63. I think was kind of the surprise hit concept. I think all of you guys and me kind of agreed that we were shocked at how good the Doctor Strange stuff was, the early Doctor Strange stuff with Lee and Ditko. He really kind of took 1963 by storm. And in 64, he's still part of the anthology, he's still part of Strange Tales, doesn't get his own title for actually quite a while, a little bit longer than the other characters. But Lee and Ditko continue to just crank away. It's like contrasting what we just said about Avengers, where it feels like they're holding back a little. Here, they are going all out to create such a full world for Strange to reside in. And when I talked about Strange in 63 with Tim, I talked about how, a lot of the appeal of Strange is that he's really off doing his own thing. He's not, even though he does cross over, and you guys talked about an issue of Thor, or Journey into Mystery, where he interacted with Thor, which was kind of neat. And I think up to this point, I don't know if he's been in Spider-Man yet. I know
annual,
he will be
just in the annual, I think.
In the annual, he's in Spider-Man. He'll show up there. He'll show up in Fantastic Four. He is part of the shared universe, but he feels very much, because he's not necessarily having a lot of adventures in New York City so much as going off and traveling to other dimensions, to other planes of existence, all this trippy stuff. That's why Doctor Strange really feels special and separated. You don't really think of him as being in the same world as the FF and the Avengers, because he's off in, as we see here, the Dark Dimension, which is another whole world. And you get to see, you can kind of compare, Todd, you're talking about Kirby building, the moon and the future. Ditko gets to imagine his versions in these whole new dimensions. Obviously, Kirby did that as well with the negative zone and other places, but Ditko really gets to expand here. If on Spider-Man, he has to draw kind of the mundane New York City aspect of it, he really gets to stretch his legs out in Doctor Strange. And here we get the Dark Dimension, we get Dormammu, who will become, or from the bat, is Strange's arch nemesis. Is Clea introduced in this issue?
She is, with your weird Ditko hair.
Yep, super creepy, weird Ditko
looks
hair.
Like whipped cream.
Yeah, but yeah, just another triumph, I'd say, as far as Lee and Ditko working on Doctor Strange. They both clearly love the character. I think Ditko probably loves the character a little more. He really puts his all into this stuff, and that's saying something, because we just talked about a Ditko tour de force on the Spider-Man annual, but it's almost on a new level when he's doing the Doctor Strange stuff. And Dormammu is a great design. Awesome looking villain who literally, if you introduce Dormammu in 2018 with the same visual, which they more or less did in the Doctor Strange movie, you don't need to do a lot of updating. He's a cool looking villain. Like, there's not a lot of work to be done there. And just visually, Doctor Strange is killing it. Stan is definitely still engaged enough to come up with kooky, off-the-wall concepts. And yeah, I'd argue that Doctor Strange into 64 remains one of the most vibrant, interesting strips in the Marvel canon.
So I never knew how to pronounce that name until the Doctor Strange movie, and It was always the Dread Dormammu, right? It was always the Dread Dormammu. Oh, great character, amazing visual, the flaming face, the flaming head. As a kid, I was I would get him mixed up with Mephisto just a little bit, just because I didn't read a whole lot of non-mainstream. I don't want to say mainstream, but I read a lot of Spider-Man and kind of books
the big guns.
Yeah, and so I kind of associated these characters until books like Marvel U and Marvel Age, where I could learn more. And there was another book called The Marvel Saga, which came out in the 80s and kind of chronologically took reprints and panels and tried to lay out the Marvel timeline really well. And I wish I still had those issues.
So good.
Yeah. And like I said, great design on this, but Ditko really gets to stretch out, and he's keeping pace with Kirby as far as imagination here.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. You really are in another plane of existence. It's awesome. And you didn't see that anywhere else in the Marvel U at this point, or in comics in general, I don't think.
Yeah, Doctor Strange was unique. I think that's part of why we've come to appreciate him so much through our modern lens. I think the Doctor Strange, to a lesser extent, X-Men. X-Men, I have said, has really won me over. And I think they were doing some weird stuff there, too. But the more experimental stuff that Kirby and Lee and Ditko did really stands out to me as far as being the stuff that holds up to this day, and I think Doctor Strange is the prime example of that.
Yeah, and keep in mind these are 6-page stories, maybe. 10-page stories. They're cramming so much into it, and Ditko and Lee are doing just as good a work as they are on Spider-Man on these books. So
absolutely,
maybe not as popular as Spider-Man just because of the offbeat nature. But if you were a weird kid, this would appeal to you. Say you were messing around with the psychedelics in 1964, or even if you were a later teen and a beatnik or something, you were into this. So,
as we've said, man, this was for a very specific audience who loved it very much, and to this day, I think, Doctor Strange. I know a new series just started this week or a couple weeks ago by Mark Waid and Jesus Saiz. I've not had a chance to check it out yet. I don't know if you have.
No, I'm still working through the Jason Aaron stuff.
Doctor Strange is big shoes to fill, man. To me, the Lee Ditko stuff really looms large over pretty much every other Doctor Strange story that's ever gone down. Certain stuff stands out. I think Doctor Strange The Oath by Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin
That's a great
is a standout story. I think, as I've said before on this podcast, Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, Tragedy and Triumph, or Torment and Triumph, or whatever the frick it's called.
Who is the writer on that?
I believe it. I want to say Roger Stern.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% on that. I know Mignola did the art. But yeah, there's some good Doctor Strange stories here and there, but it's hard to compare to this original Lee Ditko stuff.
Yeah, I used to read Doctor Strange here and there in the 80s just because I would pick up every comic I had money for, and that was on the spinner rack. And it was a random issue that had Captain Marvel, the Monica Rambeau character, and Scarlet Witch. And apparently Doctor Strange was bi-monthly at that point, so you didn't have it all that often. But it had Dan Green, who's an excellent inker. He did the pencils on that issue. It was fantastic.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I just remember that. Don't remember much about the story, but the art was terrific. I also remember that random issue of Doctor Strange used an unauthorized image of Amy Grant. I don't know if you know about that story. And
I've heard a little bit about that.
There was some kind of controversy about that, but I'm sure that's Googleable. But Doctor Strange, great character, never worked in a team until the Defenders, and that's something that I can't wait to get into because it's kind of a blind spot for me. I need to get into those early Defenders.
It's a blind spot for a lot of people. Yeah, I like you, was a kid who tried to pick up pretty much everything, especially everything Marvel. Like, I picked up random issues of Captain America and Iron Man, even though I didn't really care about them, Thor, all the characters. But I will say, I don't think I ever bought an issue of Doctor Strange when I was a kid. I just was none of them ever jumped out at me. And I kind of, I thought he was a lame character. I've said that before here. And I think between revisiting his early stuff, the movie take, and writers just taking a shine to him in recent years, I think he's a very revitalized character and more appreciated in retrospect member of the Marvel fraternity. But we'll get to more of that next time. So I think that is our 1964, Todd. Any other closing thoughts?
I don't think so. Been a lot of fun. And I think to me the thing about Doctor Strange is he goes all the way back to the beginning. So many of these characters were joined kind of in the middle, or you get characters like the Surfer and the more offbeat stuff that happened in the later 60s, but he goes all the way back, and it's pretty amazing that something so different and so enduring started way back then.
Absolutely.
So that kind of wraps up Doctor Strange. I don't like the Clea design initially, but it was nice to get him a female counterpart, or at least some supporting character besides the Ancient One and Wong.
And she fares a little better than some of the other female characters from the 60s we've discussed. Yes. She has her own agency as far as a purpose beyond just being Doctor Strange's girlfriend. So we'll see how she develops as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So that's it on 1964, guys. The next you'll hear will be, I believe, Marvel Age, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be following Masterclass's lead and splitting into two parts moving forward.
That is correct.
You guys will get part one of 1965 coming soon, and then we will be back here. I will have another guest, and we will talk 1965. But Todd, it's been a real great treat talking 1964 with you over the course of 2 episodes. Anything else you want to plug? Well, you have the chance.
Just listen to Marvel Age all day long, every day. Go back and re-listen. There's so many great podcasts here on Place to Be Nation and Place to Be Nation Pop and Pro Wrestling Only. We have a ton. Even if you are not into all of the various areas of interest that we are, comics, wrestling, pop culture, something's going to be up your alley. And so thanks for listening very much. It's been a lot of fun. I'm on Twitter as @Todd Weber Guitar. And now that the NBA draft is over, most of my takes will be back to things like comics and movies.
There we go. I already talked about, I'm on Twitter as @BenJ Morse. I'm on Instagram @BenMorse882. I'm on the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page, which you guys should definitely check out. I was recently on Hard Traveling Fanboys. That episode should still be up. It's a countdown episode talking about best dads. That was a lot of fun. And and I already mentioned the TED Talk, which I hope everyone goes and enjoys. But that's going to wrap things up for us here on this edition of Marvel Age Masterclass. Thanks as always for listening, guys. Please get in touch with myself, with Todd, with everyone involved at Place to Be Nation Comics. We want to hear from you, and we want to make this as interactive a podcast as possible. Hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, we'll see you in 1965. Class dismissed.
Which, of course, includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, along with Main Event, Survey Says, the Monday Night Wars, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction show, as well as Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network podcasts and pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Match of the Week podcast, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Through the Years, Worldcast, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Center Stage, and Letters from Kayfabe, plus much more. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, NBA Team, PTBN Play, Sunday Groove, Breaking Balls, and Lucha Undead,
as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans
with the hard-traveling fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and Marvel Age Podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback today. All these shows, plus others, available at PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlayStation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and thehistoryofwrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlayStation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.